All right, we'll call this board meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. Goodbye. And I want to begin tonight by recognizing that long before there was our city or town, a trading post or the Peace region, there was land, which was home to the Cree, Dene, and Métis people, First people. Grand Prairie is a rich, vibrant, multicultural city that thrives as a result of our Indigenous founders. As always, I encourage us to exercise our leadership to seek opportunities to embed a mindset of reconciliation in the work that we do as governors of the school of within. Just going to review our guiding principles, which for everything we decide and do, we will hold ourselves accountable and we will ask, is it good for students? Will it build trust and good relationships? Will it help us improve? Is it a responsible thing to do? And are we being open, honest, and ethical? With that being said, I'm looking for any changes to the agenda. Anyone have anything to add?
We're going to want to move in camera for 3 items of land, labor, and legal update.
Did anyone else have anything they needed to add or remove? I think we were gonna remove, and maybe we did already, hold on. It must be up here already. Okay, so seeing that change, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Vice Chair Cook? Any discussion? All those in favor? Perfect, thank you. It's the time in our agenda where we'd like to declare any conflicts of interest. So if anyone has anything that we should be aware of before we make these discussions, before we start these discussions, now would be the time, or at any time during the agenda, but next, we're gonna look for a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting of March 25th, 2025. Trustee Martin, any discussion? No, all those in favor? Perfect, all right. Moving right along, we had no business arising, so we're going to go to Associate Superintendent Liddell first.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're just looking to give a brief overview of the second quarter budget update. Last time we had this conversation, I think the picture is a bit different now than it was the last time we gave an update. So this period does cover September to February. And I think a few things to highlight on the revenue side. Everything is projected kind of based on what we expected to be at this time of the year, just been halfway through the year. So revenues are at 50% overall, but there are some key items that it's gonna be on the division's control, like fundraising and gifts and things like that. That's not really, it just depends on how well the schools are doing in those items and how generous the community wants to be. So those are a bit higher than the typical 50% I would expect at this time of year. But besides that, everything is tracking from a revenue standpoint. No new revenue between the last time we spoke and now. From an investment standpoint, we're seeing the impact of the lower interest rate as they go down. I think we're starting to see that our revenue from investment they're also going down as well. But again, it is tracking to almost the same as the previous year, but just a bit lower, which is expected, right? Just given, I think there's been two decreases already between September and now, so that's kind of having an impact on our revenues. But so if I move on, any questions on your revenue? Yeah, thank you. Same with the expenses, where everything again is tracking on track, is on track at 50%. The major difference between the last presentation and now was the retro pay that we had for the non-instructional employee once the ratification was done. So we did have to go back to September 1st to do the retro pay. And also from January as well, some of our deductions from CRA like CPP and EI, they do reset back to zero, so everything starts start again for all employees. So we're seeing that that's having an impact on the budget. So right now, for the first 6 months of the year, we're tracking about $1.6 million deficit, which the last time we spoke, it was a surplus of $260,000. So I think as things start to settle halfway through the year, I think we're seeing some of those expenses just starting to track as we expected. But with that, so with that, we have projected a deficit of $4.3 million this year, but everything is tracking to be just under that. So we're looking at about $3.9 million projected deficit. That's just basically taking our current deficit right now, multiplying by 2. That's kind of where that came from. But with that, we're kind of starting the conversation with the principals and even at the central office here on just trying to figure out some spending plans to make sure we do actually hit that deficit, just because we do have that commitment from the ministry on making sure we get to our ASO limit by the end of the school year. So we're already having that conversation over the next few months that we can try to get to the projected deficit. So hopefully that number's come to the 4.3 million. Any questions before I kind of move on the expense side of things?
Yeah, we have a backup plan if just for that money if it's not all spent, or is there planning or?
Yeah, so that's the conversation that's happening right now. So we've already talked to the principal at the very minimum, spend your budget, right? That's at the very minimum. And then at the central office here, we're already starting to talk to the directors on some of the things that were potentially held up that we could spend money on. We've also met with the director of IT and operations. Those are probably the two biggest spenders in the division, just to see if there are any projects that we could bring forward to the school year that would allow us to get to that point. So again, those are early stages of the conversation, but I think they've already identified a couple of things that we could spend the money on that would impact the schools and things like that. So.
If our schools expend the budgets that they've planned for the year, that's a big part of it. But as Associate Superintendent Oladelli is saying, between IT and operations and maintenance, that's where we're actually able to spend money on larger scale projects. And so we don't really worry about not being able to spend it. It's just knowing when to do that to optimize it.
The other thing too, also guys trying to make sure so have a pretty good target on what we actually want our research to do, so we don't go below that. And the other complication, which I'll touch on when I get onto the funding profile, was once we got our profile, we did notice that the clawback from the ministry was much lower than we had anticipated. So that's adding another $867,000 to our revenue. That's not reflected here because we found that out just in March, so that's not in this number. But that's part of our planning phase as well, just to make sure that we do have plans to address that additional revenue. So yeah, so that the 398, we have to get that to meet the base level and then also plan for the 867 as well. So that doesn't include an additional deficit. But I'll touch more on that when I kind of get to my volume.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the conversations around spending their budgets, what criteria you use in order to give the green light to a project?
On the schools or
Both.
So the schools, we do a budget allocation for the schools, so they already know have the amount, that's just their operating budget. So that's training, supplies and things like that. So
I suppose I was asking, sorry, I wasn't very clear about the excess, like if you think there's still gonna be room in the, over the ASO.
yeah, so that's mainly with operations and IT for the most part. I know so they're speaking with Sudesha, there's some work on the school, at the schools, like to kind of look after our phone systems, just because they're already they need replacement and upgrades and things like that. So what the criteria that we're looking at right now would be first, things at the schools, right? That's really what we can do. I know there are some schools just even on my tour, just that we do know that they need some additional TLC, I would say. So that was part of the criteria, but that's something, again, like I said, we're at the early stages of figuring that out. So we would communicate that to the schools, but right now we've just given the go ahead. Think of any projects that would allow us to meet that target, and then we'll kind of evaluate that. But the primary objective would be it has to kind of have an impact on the schools.
That's just.
Just to touch on that a little bit. So we have 4 of our schools receive what we call a small school allowance that supplements their annual budgets because they're so limited in their enrollment that they don't have the capacity to do what other schools can do. We're actually working with those 4 schools to enhance opportunities for them to, as Associate Superintendent Oladelli said, around capital items that they might not be able to purchase. So a school that needs desks and things like that for our smaller schools, we support those sorts of initiatives. And this is an example of where we're going directly to them and saying, hey, talk to us about things that you can't purchase on your own, but you would identify as being a priority. And we're finding ways to make those sorts of things happen too. So there's lots of little kind of different avenues to achieve this. And operations and maintenance is one of the larger ones too. There are always capital type projects that we plan and don't necessarily able to do that we can do some of those things. And sometimes it's as simple as storage facilities for schools and things like that, just things that we are able to help support our schools with.
I have a question on the expense side. On that line for instruction in pre-K, can you tell me about the difference between this year and last year? It's that top line on expense by program. So this year it's 2.4 and last year was 907.
You'd have to get back to you on that just so I can get my.
Okay.
Yeah, can I get back to you on that?
Yeah.
So that's just.
One thing I noticed in looking at this not in the tables, but in the report itself is that significant increase in benefit costs on a monthly basis for non-instructional benefits. It's astounding.
I looked at that too. Oh, sorry, were you thinking that was why that number was so different?
No,
Okay.
I'm not related to that, but just in looking at this number
Yes.
that benefit costs increased by $60,000 a month for half of our employees.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have for the gives you an update on next time, yeah.
Any other questions, Jenny, on the board? Not hearing any. All right, then next we have the annual employee wellness report. Associate Superintendent Robinson, you're introducing?
I'm going to introduce them. So doesn't need much introduction, but we have our Director of Inclusive Learning, Nancy Gorgachuk, here with us tonight, our Director of Human Resources, and they really tag team on our division support for employee wellness. And so the report that you've received as part of your package talks about the significant efforts the division has done really over the last 3 to 4 years in making employee wellness an action priority in our strategic plan and in the work that they do. So they're going to spend some time going through the foundational elements of wellness and then talk about some of the things we do, and then close with a little bit about what we've learned from our employees and what our next steps are. So I'll turn it over to them. If at any point you have a question, please, they were seeking to be grilled, is what they said when they were coming in here. So over to you guys.
Good evening. So the purpose of the report that you've received was just to provide you information and assurance as to like what we are, how we are fulfilling our commitments to that priority of our employee well-being. We hope that by the end you'll see that we've highlighted our strategic plan and that it really is a priority. But most importantly, we hope that when we're done today, that you have a deeper understanding of how we are strategically supporting the almost 1,000 employees that we have in the Grand Prairie Public School Division.
So this image here is something that we've shared with system leadership as well as administrators and supervisors in the organization about the importance of the work that we do with our workplace wellness. So it does prioritize workplace wellness and the key impacts that would happen within the organization with that focus in mind. Workplace wellness refers to the organization's efforts to promote and support the physical and mental health well-being of its employees. And the benefits can be reflected there to promote an overall culture of efficacy and wellness that you can see reflected in increased satisfaction of employees, employee commitment, well-being, which increases productivity and engagement, and then decreases things such as absenteeism, turnover, disability, so therefore reducing our costs.
So Grand Prairie Public School Division has always had a focus on employee wellness through the Human Resources Department. And prior to the pandemic, in my role as Student Services, I had the role of supporting schools with their student well-being and their student social emotional learning and wellness. And Human Resources was really focused on the employees. And it was just a natural convergence at the time with when Lorna Nordhagen was working, and she was just really trying to make wellness visible for our employee group. We came together, and then the pandemic really spotlighted the importance of supporting the wellness. So I just want to, you need to understand the history of your organization to understand where you're going. And this isn't something that was just new or that Tammy and I thought of. It was something that was really important in our division, but the pandemic did kind of put a spotlight on the importance of us really putting a systemic structure around it. So as Tammy and I started to collaborate, we were using, and we've shared with you this before, the resource Workplace Wellness at Works by Laura Putnam. And it's Laura Putnam's work that really guided the initial work in our school division. Because from her work, we were encouraged as an organization to start it, build it, and to make it last. So we grounded our framework in the elements of wellness that you see up on the screen there, those 9 elements of wellness. And that's where we really started our work. She encouraged us in her work for us to create meaning, design nudges and cues for our employees, and to not be afraid to launch something, to launch an initiative, experiment, iterate it, and learn from it. So those of the same vintage as myself, that might, if you're familiar with Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus, she always said, take chances, make mistakes, get messy. And that's kind of what we did from a division sense. I wouldn't say that we had all the answers when we started, but we jumped in. And we started at that time, we worked with mainly administrators, and you will see the evolution of this work because it was an admin division wellness committee. And we realized then that that wasn't good enough. We needed to be better. We needed to include more people in our work. So we invited more people to be a part of the division wellness committee. We hired a wellness and engagement coordinator. We added employee wellness reps from every school and every division to have another committee to work with us and to inform the work. In 23-24, the Human Resources Department and our system leadership worked to incorporate psychological health and safety training so that we can incorporate that into our work environments. And then in 24-25, evolving into being very visible and articulating that division-wide to support the wellness of our employees, that they had the right to disconnect. So this work has really shown us that to pull this all together, and as the evolution that I spoke of, it could be best summarized that we knew that we needed to have structures created to support the work. And some of the structures that we have created are, we have a division wellness framework that's in draft. We hope to have that published by the fall, but that was a structure that has really been guiding the work all along. We're looking forward to that, to continue guiding this growth and evolution. We have another structure would be those wellness committees that I spoke of, and site-based representatives. Structure at all of our schools and in all of our work sites is we have dedicated employee wellness time at either the staff meeting or the professional learning days. We have our employee wellness professional learning day. That's another structure that really supports this work. And we are very fortunate that we have a robust EFAP, so Employee Family Assistance Program, even if it costs a lot. We have one. Another really important is the administrative procedures that guide this work. So we have a supporting employee attendance, which is, as Tammy showed us in that one, it talks about presenteeism and absenteeism and how wellness can play into both of those. And AP 160 also has an element of safety for staff and students. And then we also have one of the pieces that are very foundational are the initiatives and strategies that we are currently leading and implementing to support staff wellness. And these are the psych health and safety. We have our employee wellness portal. If you've been on there, I hope you recognize this graphic. We have right to disconnect. That's a strategy. We have employee appreciation prize draws based on participation in our wellness activities, which are monthly at minimum. We have strategies to promote the understanding of the benefits in the employee assistance program. So it's one thing to have it, but it is also another. We're very fortunate that have people like Tammy and her department that are monitoring that, so we understand the use and we can learn from that. We have employee wellness newsletters. That's another initiative that we have. This year, we redeveloped a comprehensive employee appreciation week. There's always that fear that there's a specific day that's targeted and we're going to honor that group or this group or this group. And there's that fear that we're going to miss someone or someone doesn't feel that they have been recognized or honored or that they're not as important. And so this year it was just really a real shift of that. We had an entire week where we recognized all of the staff, in our division with some amazing that went out to all of the schools. And so that was really important to us because our messaging was that you are all very important to us and you make us successful, you make us who we are. We've implemented this year for the first time, really division-wide connection type of events that have been, they're just catching on. People aren't too sure about them maybe, but they're starting to ask more. And one of the opportunities at the Wellness Day really started to really build that momentum that, hey, these types of opportunities to come together are important. And then we also have another strategy is that we have site-based wellness funding that we allocate so that we can support the work at each site.
So Nancy said we have to understand our why, and so we have been engaging with employees and looking at the data that exists. So we have our annual assurance survey evidence, and so we see that, in 2021, it was 86% of employees felt that my workplace supports my wellness, and we're seeing that increase over the last 4 years. I've heard that 2025 is even higher, which is great. It shows us that our commitment and our focus to wellness is working. In 2024, we did a thought exchange with all employees, and we asked employees to help identify what is most important to them, to help create areas of focus and develop a strategic plan for the coming year. Employees did provide feedback on that, and we had 837 employees, I believe, complete that survey. And so the areas most important to them were supportive work environments, communication, work-life balance, and collaboration. And so we really tried to introduce those as activities and combine them with our elements throughout the year. And then, of course, we survey staff after the Wellness Day in 2024 and in 25, just to see what we can do differently, how the day can evolve. And so we've made some changes based on that feedback, and that has been positive. We've heard from our wellness reps and committee that employees were appreciative that we had made changes based on their recommendations from the survey. And we see that nearly 90% of respondents indicated that the day supported their wellness, which is great. But also that the number of respondents who strongly disagree with the day has decreased as well from 4% to 1%. Which is also great.
So when you have an iterative process of continuous improvement, it's important to remember that you plan, you design, you implement, you get feedback, and you redesign. Through this process, there are some key learnings that we have already learned and we continue to learn from in regards to our approach to supporting staff wellness. The first being having a strategic wellness focus is the right work. We've learned that. We've learned that creating those psychologically safe and healthy work environments with attention to communication and work-life balance is very important.
Ongoing engagements, like we said, with the Division Wellness Committee, but also the employee wellness representatives have provided us very valuable feedback because it's representative of all groups across the division, which has been great. It's a way for us to engage with employees, but also to create a shared purpose, opportunities to share our vision, but also help to design and plan based off that.
As you just as Tammy just shared the data, we learned that the Employee Wellness Professional Learning Day, which we just had in February of 2025, February 28th, it was very well received, and that 90% of the participants reported that it supported their wellness. And we also learned that recognition and engagement efforts, including that inclusive Employee Appreciation Week, enhanced morale and organizational pride.
And then just reflecting back on the assurance surveys, just shows that, again, that satisfaction has remained high, but also that, like Nancy had said earlier, that we're doing the right work. We continue to focus on wellness and employee well-being, and that is reflected in our survey results. I talked about what is most valuable to employees, but we also learned that Employee Wellness Professional Learning Day, dedicated wellness time at meetings, and the EFAP and benefits, sharing of those resources, both at staff meetings and PL is really important. We have a lot of new staff that come into the division, as well as a lot of existing staff. So it's important that we're continuously sharing that information, resources, and also ideas. And now we have our reps sharing ideas with each other about things that they're hosting at their sites as individual locations.
We've learned to keep continuing focusing on the priorities that the employees value of being recognized and feeling appreciated, that focus on the work-life balance and supporting our employees achieve that. And that's the importance of the supportive, connected, and collaborative cultures.
So as Nancy mentioned, we are working, this has kind of been an ongoing, is to publish and finalize our framework. It is a guiding document, but we also learned that as we added more members to provide feedback, that it was important for us to also do that collaboratively, to have that buy-in to that framework and a plan that is sustainable. Laura Putnam talks a lot about that in her book, as well as about how to make things sustainable. It's great to put out a new event or activity, but only if it's sustainable by the and valued by the organization.
One of the other next steps is that we have already we've made decisions based on the positive feedback that we've received about the Division Wellness Day, and we've consulted with the Division Wellness Committee, the each site representatives, with administration and with system leadership, and we've made the decision that we are going to go ahead next year. We've chosen our date already, February 27th, 2026, to start planning what that can look like for our staff. And although we continue with days, things like the Wellness Day and the importance of really helping our employees understand the importance of them individually embracing and taking care of their own wellness, we also have heard and we know from the research and from our learning that it is a collective responsibility at the school or the work site level to make sure that we have that culture, that environment. So we continue to be looking at that in supporting the individual, supporting the school in understanding the role that they play. And Tammy, I'm doing all of it. And but we also know that although this year, we've really spent a lot of time helping at the school level, because that's where our employees are every single day. So we need to have the impact there, but that can't be in the absence of us losing or our employees not seeing us visibly at the division, supporting their wellness as well. So we kind of have to concurrently be doing all three of these things and supporting all of this and keeping the focus on all three. And so today is Earth Day, so we thought we would just end by saying Happy Earth Day. But it actually was a really perfect time to just show you as to how something like Earth Day really does tie in and how connected all of our work really is. So Dr. Greg Wells, if any of you a past speaker, like he talked about the importance of just taking that time and forest bathing, that's just getting out into nature and taking a breath, right? So on Earth Day, it was a nice reminder of that. But we actually got Carla McLeod, who's our wellness coordinator. She sent out an email today, which is to all of the wellness reps and administrators, just to guide them as our environmental wellness focus is coming up. So on Earth Day, she shared, and I think that this really connects to the community piece as well, the environmental wellness things that are coming up. And she's got, 8 different things that are happening in our community to make sure that our schools, that our staff, our division staff are aware of them. Things like the city scrub and what's happening with their Earth Day celebrations and what the GP Grows Seed Bar is and the Dig It program, and just really connecting us as to how we can build our environmental wellness, but how we can also take those opportunities for ourselves. So it's Earth Day, and that gave us another opportunity to make some connections to wellness for our staff. And so I really appreciate personally belonging to a division that makes that visibly important. And I hope that the time that we've spent with you this evening can provide the assurance that that is happening in our schools and in the division. I think if there's closing comments or questions for us.
A great example here. Any questions? Mr. Boothia?
You said a lot of your work is based on the writing of Laura Putnam.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about her? What are her fundamental beliefs that you're choosing to enact here?
I think really fundamentally, she just, it went back to, you're not going, the start it build it and make it last. So, you're not gonna have everything perfect to begin with. And then the elements of wellness that we have up there, that comes from Laura as well. So she really talks about the importance of creating meaning for educating, make sure everybody knows about the elements, how they pertain to them, make them meaningful for the people that you're working with. But also she speaks about there is that individual, that personal choice. So to let the person decide like what element of wellness do they want to focus on? Do they need the most support in? Now, having said that, so we have all 9 elements of wellness, but we've also heard from our staff that they are really, connection, communication, those, the collaboration, those are all things that are really important to them. So we're just trying to balance what we've learned from Laura, but we're also trying to listen to our staff. But we do go back to her 9 elements of wellness. Our wellness day is planned around that. We make the connections to which element, but people can then choose. So if I've been in Edmonton with my husband for the weekend and he's been at a car show, I have to come home and really go into my financial wellness mode to figure those things out. And that really helps. And I can honestly tell you, I didn't know that was a thing before I was on this journey. I never really thought of it that way. But if you're stressed about your finances, you're not well. So to provide opportunities to let people be financially well. And we've had lots of conversations, administrators, they appreciate that. And especially some of our staff, like our support staff, like that's something that they've really embraced when, they know that everybody around them knows that, hey, we need to be thinking about these things. And everybody around here gets that these are important things to talk about and be supported in.
Just on the survey, so in 2024, strong disagreement with employee wellness. So was it just a tick a box or did they leave comments?
Yeah, it was just tick a box.
Okay.
So they were asked to determine whether the wellness day did support their wellness. And there was the 4% that felt that they were either forced to go, they had better things to do in their classrooms. But as we've encouraged all staff across the division, including caretakers, maintenance, to also attend, that it's important for all employees. We've seen that engagement and we've heard feedback from people saying, I didn't really want to go the first year, but since I went, I've learned something new. I was focused on my wellness and I realized that I needed that day.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
I really enjoy your presentation each and every year about wellness. And so I too, I liked 90% of respondents indicated that it supported their wellness. That was great. How many employees actually attend Wellness Day, and can they actually take it off and like take a leave day or whatever? I'm just curious, like out of that 90%, like how many people are we talking attend?
Yeah, so this year, I believe of the 950 people, we had 870 attend. We did ask for feedback too on the reason that they didn't attend. And there are various reasons like, a medical book that day or predetermined personal leave days, but really the number has decreased in the people that are just choosing to take the day off. It's for other reasons that they just can't have identified not attending.
Answer the question, yes, they are. They can use an entitlement to not participate in that day. What they can't do is choose to go to work to do other things or that sort of thing. Wellness day is for wellness. And if you're choosing not to, then you can use an entitlement. We don't limit that, so.
And then the other thing is 85% prefer to begin the day with social wellness versus the keynote. So can you tell us what is that social wellness? And then can you also talk a little bit about some of the activities that our staff sort of can choose? I'm a big fan, so it's like, all I want to do is build a charcuterie board.
So based on the feedback from the thought exchange, that collaboration, supportive work environments was really important to employees. And so we had met with the committee and looked at how do we start the day. And so it was determined that rather than a keynote, we would provide opportunities to still have a Sandy present and Nancy to speak, to start the day, but then employees were given the opportunity to go for a walk, play trivia in the gym, or visit one of our booths that we had set up, or just spend the time collaborating or visiting with staff.
And so the structure of the day looked a little different too, because we actually had a breakfast that people could come, and there were breakfast sandwiches, so it was easy. It was catered to have it happen, but we structured time so that there was opportunity for people to come and just be with each other. And that's feedback that we got relative to Wellness Day, but it's also feedback we get on the superintendent's address too. Don't tell Superintendent McDonald, but people say the thing they enjoy the most is the opportunity to see each other, because our division is a growing division. But there's also lots of opportunity for people. Maybe that's the only time of the year they get to connect with an old friend from a school and make those connections. And so we're responsive to that, saying, okay, let's make that happen, because building community within our school division is a priority too, and that does that. So, yeah.
Great day. As a committee, we talked a little bit about that 2 years ago, after the first time that our staff had heard our keynote, Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe, it was like, very, very high, like just, and then she came back the second year and didn't necessarily listen as to what we were looking for. And that kind of turned some people off, because I felt they'd gotten the same thing as well. And one of the other things that we talked about, because there are still people that really do want that messaging, but a gym bleacher is not the most comfortable place to sit. So when we're talking about wellness and your comfortability of how you're receiving the message, so we're really trying to balance that versus a shorter snap, which is what happened this year. Everybody came together, short period of time, had a short message, and then this opportunity for it's social wellness, it's connection.
I would agree with you both the keynote for sure. I wanted to just move on to the thought exchange if I could. 835 employees, that's amazing to get that kind of response rate on a survey. So that is amazing. And so I like sort of the themes around your sort of, recognition, engagement. Were there any sort of real sort of standout things from your perspective around maybe areas of improvement that we should be aware of? I mean, we know we're eyes in, fingers out, so to speak, but just were there any sort of improvement areas that we should be aware of in that from your perspective? And
Part of it is the question we asked for the thought exchange. So by design, thought exchange prompts people to give their thoughts on specific topics. And so our question wasn't about what we don't do. It's what do you value most to support your wellness was the key prompt. And from that, we got thought exchanges shared. So I don't know about, you're really talking about outlier kind of information.
Yes.
I don't know how to comment on that, but I do know that the themes that came out of that were pretty consistent based on the prompt that we put into thought exchange, which was talk to us about what's most important. And that's where when the team is talking about, we've got the dimensions of wellness that guide our work, but then we also know that collaboration, we also know that opportunities to connect with each other are important. That's where that came from as well. Feeling valued in the workplace, that was something that was clear in the results too. So
the other thing that the thought exchange did, it gave each individual site the opportunity to reflect on theirs as well. And that's kind of what's happening across the division right now as we come together, and sites who are maybe for a year or two have already been doing something very focused and intentional. They share, and the others are starting to listen and learn, and they're sharing what a positive impact it's had at their site. So, and I know some of those administrators started some of those initiatives after what they learned from the thought exchange as well. So it doesn't only provide the division, it provided each site the opportunity to reflect on what their staff were saying as well.
that's great.
something else that the team talked about, that it's in the report and it kind of slipped by it a little bit, but the support for employees through our administrative procedure that supports presenteeism, that supports attendance at work, can sometimes be seen as an oversight administrative procedure. And it's not. The genuine intent of it is to help employees who potentially struggle with attendance for whatever reason, get the supports they need to help them be better employees and better at attendance. And so one of the things we get for feedback is a lot of positive feedback from people who maybe in part, because it describes a process if people have kind of chronic absenteeism, and describes a process where we intervene and have conversations. And in general, people appreciate those conversations because them knowing that it matters that they're missed and that we want them to be at work means a lot to a lot of people. And so the outcome of that administrative procedure has been really positive too. It creates the opportunity for conversations that can sometimes be hard to have. So.
One of the things you had asked about is there an area of focus? One of the things we learned is that not a lot of employees knew that they have access to employee and family assistance programs. And so we have increased our communication with that. Again, it's something that is, you need it when you need it, but just continuously providing that information to employees, having posters in staff rooms, and again, sharing with our leaders that that's a resource for employees is really important as well. So that's one thing we learned.
And even our site reps, they came because they're learning about this as well, because they're supposed to be leading at their school. And then they are the ones that are saying, you know what, when we're doing that element, we should be going at the staff meeting, or we should be showing everybody where on the portal or where on the, at their wellness, you know, whether they're Sun Life or their, what's the other one? ASCBP, whatever they are, so that they show where it is and actually just, you know, be hands-on, because, you know, people don't know what they need until they need it. So that came from the different actual site reps. They were like, you know what, we could do a better job of this. We could help people. We could show people.
Mr. Kuziak?
Can you take us back to the very beginning, to the very genesis of the whole wellness idea in the workplace? What were we seeing? What were we experiencing? What made us think that we needed a wellness day and a wellness coordinator? It's expanded to a wonderful program now, but where did it all come from? I forgot. Can you help me?
So as I shared, right, like, I think our division, like, there's always been visibility on staff wellness, even if it was just from our HR director back in the day, Lorna Nordhagen, sending us emails, reminding us to take care of ourselves, reminding us that we had this in our assistance program. So I think that we've, you know, putting out little challenges out there. I think we've always had that, that level.
Fundamentally, we're a school division that has always cared about the people who work in our school division. And I'm jumping in a little bit, Nancy, but being able to formalize that work and being able to coordinate it was something we always recognized as being necessary. And you're right, human resources championed that work. And really coming into the pandemic, we really needed that opportunity to be a little bit more coordinated and focused on the work we were doing, because it's an expectation that organizations have wellness initiatives. But it's not an expectation that you embed it as deeply as we have. And so if you look at the commitment from practitioners in schools to the school leaders to system leaders, including myself and the superintendent, believing in the importance of wellness has been the foundational work over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. It's taking what we were doing and coordinating it and making sure that for the right reasons, because it is an authentic investment in our people, that the work of wellness becomes a priority for us. And it's something that we don't just talk about in mid-February. It's continuously our responsibility as leaders to make sure that supporting people through different ways of managing individual and collective wellness is a responsibility we have.
Tell me a little bit about how the take on the right to disconnect was received from staff and maybe from families, if you've heard.
Can't comment to the families, but I know that it has been brought up at both our committee and our rep meeting about how valued that was perceived by employees. Just that even one of our newer teachers said, I never thought that I could have my email removed from my phone, but she's like, when that guideline came out, I did. And she's like, it's just provided me so much more time with my family. I'm not having to watch my phone. And that's just one reflection, but
that was another piece that they said, you know what, we could maybe at the staff meeting, even if people still want to have it on their phone, but they could be shown how to shut off notifications or shut off the notifications on your watch. So you don't have to be nudged by your watch that this has come in, you can just shut it off. And that way you can go and check it. So it's been well received from the people at the table there. That's who we have contact with, that we're talking with. I don't know if James has more from the schools and school leaders, but what we hear from the reps is that they just appreciate that the division has put that out there, that this is okay. It's still a choice. Like, there's still that element of choice that people want to, you know, but to know that it's okay to have that choice. And we were talking about the importance of then training people to make sure they know how to use the tech tools that they have, like a schedule a send of an email and things like that. So with that comes, some training, but they're just people at the table that we speak, they're just appreciative that our division recognizes it and that the opportunity is there should they choose. They just feel supported because we've said it's okay.
I think the thing I like about right to disconnect in our implementation is it's not a policy, right? You enforce policies, and it's about how we think about communicating and about how we have to respect other people's wishes about communicating. And so it's a self-monitored agreement around how we connect with our parents and connect with each other. And I think the feedback we've got is thanks, this helps, because I feel sometimes obligated to be engaged when I really should be doing other things. If you remember one of the videos that were prepared as part of the Work Northwest, Work in Grand Prairie campaign that we were doing, one of the teachers really eloquently talked about the impact of right to disconnect, saying when I'm at work, I get to be at work, and when I leave work, I get to be a dad, right? And so that was a powerful statement about the self-management we have around right to disconnect. I think it's a tremendously positive thing in our school division because communication in this day and age can be relentless, right? And so self-managing that is I think success on our behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for your presentation. I really appreciated the report. I think it's really cool, wellness initiatives in the division. It's not specifically related to the content on the report, but I think that it has a strong tie to employee wellness, and I think you two are definitely the ones to ask about it. I've heard from several places in the community recently on social media and in person about, I would say, like a perceived rise in incidents relating to like student aggression against teachers in classrooms. And we heard earlier this year that administration was working with incident reports from the schools to understand more about the extent of the issue in the division. So I've just got a few questions for you related to that. First, in the feedback to your wellness related surveys and thought exchanges you were talking about, I was wondering if you had heard, I guess, like similar concerns about those kinds of incidents. I'm curious whether you're seeing a trend in those incidents, whether it's increasing or decreasing, and maybe just how you support teacher wellness after those kinds of incidents.
We have the data. It is certainly something that I monitor. It's anytime we have an incident, James and I both receive that from a health and safety perspective. And a response and how we support our staff is we have a complex behavior support team that if there's been anything that has occurred in our schools, that the complex behavior support team would be able to go and respond to support not only the student and the planning, but to just be that reminder that that employee as well is going to need that support as to what just occurred. I don't have data that I can share tonight about like increases, decreases. I don't.
That makes sense. It's a wellness.
Yeah, I don't
And
have
to
that.
clarify, that information doesn't come to us, Trustee Johnston, through surveys. That's through our occupational health and safety reporting where an incident has occurred. And it could be a variety of incidences, but in particular, Director Gorgachuk and I have asked to be copied on reports where students have become have engaged in some sort of act of physicality. And so we do have that information. It looks like a variety of things. And to be honest, it looks like students with patterns of behavior that we look at. And that's why Director Gorgachuk has her hands on that because of her connection to specialized programming and some of the things that happen in those programs as well. So.
And then from the employee lens, I also receive them, but so that I can do check-ins with our safety coordinator as well, if it's a WCB claim, those types of things. But we also do check-ins because our administrators do a great job of saying, hey, so-and-so had an incident at school. Can you just do a check-in with them? And so our HR team will just say, hey, we understand that something happened at school. We're just checking in, making sure that you have the resources you need.
That's well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Sorry for.
No.
One thing, and we don't have data to support it necessarily, but I have a curiosity. We don't ask the question of people, does wellness improve your attendance at work? But one thing we're able to see is that this year is different than the last couple of years have been around teacher presenteeism and support staff presenteeism. We're seeing less absences from work than we've seen in previous years. it makes me curious about, there's a lot of factors that could contribute to that, but part of it, I have a curiosity about wellness and being focused on individuals, if that has a benefit as well. So hard to correlate the two, but I have a curiosity of it.
That was great. We definitely thank you both for your time and your report. It's something that Grand Prairie Public School Division does well and has to do well, like, with 1,000 people who are affecting 8,000 people. It's definitely very important. So thank you both for your report. You're welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. We welcome you, or you can sneak away and we won't say.
No judgment.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next, moving on to the report. So the first thing in there was the education bill in the spring legislation session. So as you guys have seen through the news and through emails that we've from the minister, there was an announcement earlier this month. There was a Zoom call that was sent out to chairs and superintendents. So I attended it with Associate Superintendent Robinson and the rest of the directors. I was like, yeah, that's what I meant. What call your associate? That's an old term. To summarize, in my own words, their government is looking to replace the term private school with independent school in the Education Act. They made it clear in that Zoom meeting and in news articles and stuff that there's no changes to the way that those boards are governed. It's just in the name. That there was another change so that boards, school boards, city councils, et cetera, cannot use code of conduct violations to dismiss trustees or city councilors. Only electors could do that through the recall process. They talked in our Zoom meeting about the fact that boards could still sanction trustees. So including removing their voting rights, removing them from attending meetings, remuneration, sitting on committees, things like that. But the recall notice would be how they would have to be removed as a trustee or a city councillor. For teacher complaints, there was going to be a fee attached to an appeal, and that would and some changes to reporting, changes to notification to include if a teacher moved to another division and had an outstanding complaint, you would be able to tell that other division.
When you talk about appeals, are you talking about complainant appeals or?
Teacher complaints.
So what they were talking about was if a complaint is lodged and the commission does their work and comes to a finding, there is a pathway for appeal. But they're talking about putting a fee on that pathway for appeal, because what they were finding is there was a lot of quick use of that. Oh, there's an appeal, I'll appeal. And that's jamming up the system a little bit. So they want to put some fees around it so that people are a little bit more judicious in maybe how they appeal a decision that's been made by the provincial commission that hears those matters.
And they
Is how
did
I understood
mention,
it.
yeah, they did mention too that if your complaint was appealed, you would get that fee back. So they wouldn't keep that if it was actually.
So for the most part, these are appeals by the complainant. Hey, you got it wrong, or hey, that penalty is not sufficient enough.
That's how.
That's my understanding.
And honestly, like this was a fire hose
Yeah.
of different items, and that was one that got about 45 seconds, but we noted it because of its importance to us.
Mhm.
Like everything, the regulations will be where the details are. But that's the intent of it is the complaint to really cause a little bit more pause before people appeal.
The other thing of note was that Alberta Infrastructure will own all new school buildings and will lease them to divisions. There was not a lot known about what that change means. In fact, like how long the lease were going to be, they don't know that yet. They're working through the process.
So the obvious worry with that, sorry if I can jump in,
Please.
is that under any circumstance, when you're leasing something, that lease can also be discontinued by the leasee, the leaser. And so we asked questions and they were very good at not answering questions in the session, but we asked a question saying, what does that mean? Can a lease actually, so if the government engages in leasing a school to a division, can they rescind that lease and offer it to somebody else? And the question was, we'll have to see. The concerning change in how schools are allocated to divisions.
So I believe, you know, as we've seen with legislative changes, until they know what it's gonna say, it's hard to make the rules around it because it can get batted around so much. So I anticipate that they're gonna be doing more engagement with CAS, with ASBOA, with school boards, with teachers, with, you know, all sorts of those, probably after, but it was interesting. And yeah, there's a lot. A few of the questions that I wrote down that I thought you guys might be interested in is like why the code of conduct changed. And the answer that my understanding, and again, I don't want to put words in their mouth, so this is my interpretation of what they said, is to make democracy more powerful and put the decision in the hands of voters. So they've heard complaints, is my understanding, and this will help squash that. Does the code of conduct thing apply to independent schools? Well, it doesn't, because they're not democratically elected, so that wouldn't apply to them. There was a question around insurance for government-owned buildings. You know, that would help us if they were paying the insurance for the buildings that they owned. That's unknown. They're looking at implementation. They'll kind of be going through some of those things. And so yeah, those were the.
Just to jump on that.
Please do.
Well, the question was, and it was a good one in that context, was if you're going to own schools and lease them, we won't have to pay the insurance on those buildings then, right? Because we don't own them. And the answer back was, we'll look into that. But it's the right line of thinking, you know, like you kind of, you get with it, but you get with it. So
Yeah.
we'll see how they actually adjudicate it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what I have for that update. I'd be happy to not be able to answer your question. Trustee Owen.
So are they called independently public schools?
My understanding is they're going from private to independent.
Oh, it's independent schools.
Yes.
Okay, just to get away from the private type.
That's,
Just to be independent.
yes, I don't really know.
Oh, that's a bunch of crap.
Any other questions? No, did I miss anything else?
No, there was a lot,
There was a lot.
really quickly.
Yeah, those were my notes on that. The next thing was the local podium event at the Composite High School on the 11th. So Trustee Martin, Deputy Superintendent Robinson, the division directors, Principal Veda, Mrs. Westwater, students, media, and other guests attended.
And Associate Superintendent Oladelli,
Yeah, wasn't he on this list?
guest of honor.
He was on this list. He was there as well. Attended the public announcement at the Composite High School and were able to share with the government of Alberta has given us design funding to add 3 stories, 18 classrooms for about 450 students. Obviously, we're thrilled with that announcement. It's the first in a couple crucial steps to get the construction funding. So we're excited to move forward through that process and hope it's a quick process. And it was a really well done event. The comp always puts on a good event, and those who organized it did a great job. So thank you for that whole team who put that together. Did I miss anything, Trustee Martin? All right.
I guess there was a good presentation of food from some of the foods people
Oh, yeah.
there.
Yeah, that was great.
And they actually, they talked a little bit about, what was that machine said? So router type thing, but it was a
CNC.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. CNC meets a router,
Yeah.
meets woodworking design. It was a fashion.
Showcase some of that stuff to the MLA stuff, which is really neat, to showcase that to them and
It was a
the students were away traveling to compete in some of those competitions, so.
And the media, I think, were
Yeah.
poking around at some
Yeah,
of those
for sure,
things.
so that was good to capture that.
And foods as well. And we had one of the young ladies who had created all of the desserts for that event. It was like watching a Food Network television show because she was presenting it like you would, saying, well, today I prepared for you. And then she went through all the different things and how she made them and that sort of thing. And it's just that opportunity to showcase students makes those events especially.
Not only that, a particular student who he's referring to told me she's gonna be in neuroscience. Yeah, that's some pretty outstanding kids at that school for sure.
Awesome.
It's great. Alberta Public School Boards Association, so one meeting, Trustee Buziak.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting was held on April the 9th here in this building. It's an in-person meeting. We actually also had in person the AFB President Marilyn Dennis and CEO Dr. Abood here with us, so a pleasure to see them in person. They talked a little bit about this year's proposed budget. They've been getting feedback since January from boards. They've built a 4-year framework for sustainability that's been approved by the Board of Governors, but is not binding. And we'll probably see that at the spring general meeting. They're proposing a 2.5% fee increase for next year. And they're trying to balance the budget in 4 years with a reserve of 4.1 million. So that, we heard from Director Tammy Henkel. She was talking about Zone 1 is asking for a government review of the inclusive education model because it's 20 years old now. They want the model updated to better reflect today's needs. And I remember sitting here asking Nancy Gorgachuk a question about the special education standards and what difference that would make to the work of our division. And the short answer to the question is not much. Wouldn't make much difference. So it would be interesting to see how that turns out. And I know Deputy Superintendent Robinson was poised there to make a comment.
No, just those long-awaited standards around inclusive education have been so longly awaited that they're going to be stale dated already. We're talking about they themselves are 8 or 10 years old, and for whatever reason that they're not being presented, then so be it. Our work continues about being as inclusive as we can be given the context we have. It's a bit of a loss to think much about what those standards may or may not do.
Another concern raised at the meeting is the amount of money boards are spending on inclusion, the amount of money more than they're receiving that they're spending on inclusion. So I guess that'll come out with the budget discussion and so on at the general meeting. We heard from Marilyn Dennis, and often the first thing she says in her report is, if you want more detail about what I have to say, go to the ASBA website and check it out there. They have a dedicated area on the portal for government updates, and they're listed by date and topic, and the communications from government to ASBA are not edited. So you might find that interesting. ASBA is now invited to attend government announcements and is allowed to respond to whatever the announcement is. So that's news. Going on then to Vice President Shalley's report. She talked a bit about position statements and how the association lives by the position statements. And they like it when, for purposes of advocacy, if boards write letters to government, if they CC the ASBA so they can take up the cause in their advocacy efforts as well. Dr. Abood said that the association is doing lots of work to support prospective trustees. New items on the agenda, the effect of funding profiles on Zone 1 school boards. So they're asking us to bring back to the May meeting areas where gains or losses have occurred and indicate the effect that these have on the services being provided. And also the effect of utilization rates on school districts. And I've already sent Associate Superintendent Ola Gully an email with respect to these two issues, and he's sort of working on an answer for me, but we'll get some more detail on that later. And it's all needed for ASBA advocacy efforts. There was a question from Peace Wapiti at the Zone 1 meeting that had to do with the utilization rates. And what I can gather from the question is that if it's a small school with a utilization rate of less than 60%, those schools are funded at $49 a square meter or square foot. But if you're over 60%, then the funding is $69. Care to comment?
Well, I'm actually going to pass it over to Associate Superintendent Oladelli because that is true. There is a cut line where your utilization of space significantly impacts the amount of funding you get. And I don't know if Associate Superintendent Oladelli can recall it off the top of his head, but we can find that. I'll pass it over to
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull it up. Yes, but that is correct. So we do get different rates based on utilization, but
Yeah, that's part of the whole reason that we
Yeah.
check our boundaries.
Yeah, want our schools to have a
Yeah.
certain utilization, and then there's also the opportunity in schools to declare them as non-instructional. We've learned that recently too, non-instructional spaces, so that they don't count against you.
Mm.
You can't do that in a school and say, well, we're just not using this section, but as an example, schools where we have, Avondale's a great example. Avondale, our utilization is really quite low relative to the footprint of the building, but we're really only calculated on the instructional spaces we use because we've designated another space for childcare. And so that doesn't work against us. But other schools that have lower utilization challenge how our footprint for operations is funded. And those small schools would really feel it than their 40% enrollment in a declining school.
So this will become a point of advocacy for ASBA because the position that was cited at the meeting was that it's a small school. We still have to turn the lights on. We still have to heat the building, which costs us money.
so just for context, just for us, we do have about 18,000 square meter that's considered underutilized. So that's where we get lower rates on those. So it is $46 for $46 for underutilized space and $68 for utilized space. Which again, for most divisions, we still have to pay the full the full cost to service those buildings. But that's kind of what it set funded.
All right, and that's pretty much it, Chair. The next meeting is May the 14th. It's hosted by Northland School Division, but they'll have it in East River. I don't know any more details than that. And when I do find out, I'll let you know.
Not able to make that one, just so you know. Did anyone have any questions for Trustee Buziak on that? I did also note that May 2nd is when all of so with these new resolutions and timelines, it looks like we should have them a lot closer or a lot more in advance than we have the last few years, well, forever, towards the spring general meeting. So it looks like we should have everything that we're going to get by May 2nd. So I'll work into our one of our next two agendas in May before our spring general meeting to have a committee of the whole before it to go over our voting for the resolutions and the budgets and things like that. So I'll work with superintendent and water to figure that out. We won't have to have it on Zoom the day before, I guess is the good part. Public School Boards Association, Vice Chair Cook.
Thank you. So this spring, PSBA actually was 3 days. So after our zone meeting, I drove to Edmonton because PSBC held a government MLA reception. So that was Wednesday the 9th, and then there was a meeting the 10th and also the 11th. And the reception was at the Matrix Hotel. It was very well attended by MLAs and ministers. Minister Nicolaides was there. He, highlighted things like the funding manual, year change from the 3-year weighted moving average. He talked about the rapid enrollment, growth and commitment to build schools. He talked about the increases to grants by over 2%. Minister McIver was there from Municipal Affairs, so there was certainly opportunities to charter sort of independent school sort of discussion was certainly alive and well at PSBC. Minister Long of Infrastructure was also there. Our own MLAs, Ron Weed and Melindic, were also there. And then also Mr. Tavon of Forestry and Parks was there, but sort of very, very well attended. And there certainly seemed to be support for public schools and public education. So that was the first sort of evening. The next day, as the usual fashion of PSBC, it's more sort of informational. And so some of the topics of conversation were around something called sharenting, which is similar to what sort of we've been talking about in terms of, taking pictures and what the sort of potential repercussions are of taking, photos without necessarily having consent. And this concept of sharenting, however, has is basically the definition is considered anyone, trusted adult who does anything with a child's private digital information. And typically it's parents and sharing on social media and Instagram and just sort of extending information about minors on a digital platform. And so from an education perspective, I mean, I felt like our division was fairly well sort of informed about it, but certainly some of the risks relate to privacy, reputational danger, legal liabilities, exposure to the misuse of the information and also increased security. So that was interesting. The next session was actually presented on behalf of Grasslands Public. And so they are a school, their major city would be Brooks. And so they encompass like 2,500 square miles, 3,500 students, 708 colonies that are sort of well engaged. And what was interesting is that area, they have one of the largest meat packing plants, not only in Canada, but in the world. And so they talked about being the city of 100 hellos. They're so multicultural and so diverse. And they talked about some of the challenges that they have related to education, which I'm not sure that we've seen, but something that's really interesting is both parents work. They have, multiple family dwellings. And so parents would bring their children to school, say at 10, and then the other parent would come and pick the children up to take them out of school at 2, not recognizing or understanding that school might be from, 8:30 to 4:30. So they implemented these walking bus routes. And you sound, or you deputy superintendent,
Concept is.
yeah. So I had not really heard it before, but it was where EAs actually walk, because when the distance is reasonable, they actually walk to these children's homes and then pick them up, and they're like a sort of a group of students that they pick up and they take them to school, and they might be at home by themselves, but then it gets them to stay for a full day. And then the EA at the end of the school day will walk them home as well. They call it a walking school bus. So it was really kind of an interesting concept that I hadn't sort of heard about before. And then there was also a presentation about that a couple of Rotarians in Athabasca sort of area. There's, I guess, an international presentation called Don't Meth With Us. And so it's not just focused on methamphetamines, but they go into schools, kind of, in that sort of junior, sort of high range, and they do this presentation where schools sort of will invite them. So again, I hadn't sort of heard about that. So it was certainly interesting. Graham Thompson was the commentator that spoke sort of the evening, and so he's a CBC political analyst, and his information is embargoed usually when he speaks to it. And then the next day was sort of spent on sort of the regular council meeting, and so there always is this environmental scan, and so I always appreciate our team for providing us sort of with the right sort of information. And so this time there was conversation about, changes in transportation. There was some sort of discussion around sort of what divisions are doing related to, suspensions and expulsions. And then there was also some discussion that we could share division by division around some of the results of the recent labor action. And so I do feel really very fortunate that, we're in a Grand Prairie Public School Division where we have our group agreement, and our agreement was settled, and we're very fortunate. So I certainly was able to speak about, I think, sort of the trust and about our non-instructional committee and those types of things. So that was really great. One thing that I did want to talk about, 2 more things, that's it. So Janet Brown, she is actually a pollster, and she often is doing sort of independent polls, but the Public School Board Association commissioned some research and asked her to assist us in gaining a better understanding of the attitudes, perspectives, and opinions of Albertans regarding the province's public schools. And so there was survey questions administered through the Trend Watch Alberta. So that's a monthly omnibus survey of 900 Albertans, age 18 and over. And so she did sort of conduct that survey. And so tomorrow at 2, I'm going to attend a virtual meeting, but I do have a copy of the embargoed information that you would be able, that I could certainly provide a copy to you as well. But basically, The results, yeah, it's, so I mentioned a whole document, I know you don't want me to, and it's like, no, it's not that you don't want me to share it, it's department, so anyway, I'm not gonna.
But there's a
Yeah.
second tomorrow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow?
it's tomorrow at 2 p.m.
There's one on Friday
Friday.
at 2:30, which is Janet Brown presenting the PSBA's polling
I
survey.
thought it was.
Tomorrow is,
Where's the bargaining?
there's
Yeah.
a bargaining one in the morning and then there's a Jordan's principal one in the afternoon. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Yeah,
Okay, well, I think it's Friday, yeah, maybe they
coming.
switched, but it's coming, anyway, I just was, it's very interesting information and. Can say no more. And then the other thing that I can say is around the 2026 budget discussions, because this is certainly the time of the year that PSBC sort of talks about budget. And so there will be a video forthcoming. It's not available yet. But once again, there's discussion about budget, and I'll remind you that last year a motion was passed and there was a 5% increase to membership fees, and there seemed to be a fair bit of consensus and support for similar sort of fee increase ranging 3 to 5%. I have the data in terms of what that would mean for us, for costs, but there certainly were options presented of status quo, increase sort of the cost of events, look at reserves, and then also increasing membership. So it does mean 5% would mean a slight increase for Grand Prairie public, but there'll be more information forthcoming.
Any questions for the script?
Is this an election year at PSBA?
It will be the same for every year, so in the fall.
After the election.
After the election, yeah. Yeah, so Dennis McNeil, who's been the president for 2 years, will complete his tenure.
Thank you for attending this on our behalf. It's always interesting to hear what's going on there. Our board retreat, professional learning retreat. So most of our board, Deputy Superintendent Robinson, Associate Superintendent Olidelli, and Mrs. Westar, we attended a professional development day here in this room, focused on policy development. And policy development's obviously at the core of our work as a board. And it was really helpful, I found, to gain a deeper understanding of best practices, but it was great to kind of walk away with some tools in the toolbox, I thought, and some ideas on how to gain common understanding and the value of looking at a few different things. So, thanks to Mr. Smeaton, who was our facilitator for that day, because it was, it was definitely a lot of learning. It was good. And anyone have anything they wanted to share that I missed on that?
Just on line with what you're saying, there was opportunity to actually talk about some of our policies and sort of do sort of that scenario kind of discussion, which although, I don't necessarily love things like role playing, but it was good to actually go through and
Look for
gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. The 2025 Chamber Roundtable, Vice Chair Cook.
You bet. Yeah, I had the pleasure on April 4th to spend the morning with Deputy Superintendent Robinson and myself. And so really appreciated the opportunity. There were several community members, including our 2 neighboring school boards that also attended. But in addition, there was the city, the county, again, our MLAs were there. I was really pleased that Nolan talked about the comp design funding through the accelerator program, and he talked about how we got the planning and shorter timeframes. And he was actually one of the first ones to speak, so I was really pleased that he actually identified and said that. But basically, each of the organizations, including ourselves, got to talk a little bit about opportunities and some of the challenges. And so, as I said, it was all of the sort of typical groups that you would imagine, like key stakeholders, like International Paper, NWP. There was FANFOR, the new Alberta Medical Program. There was I already said NWP, but the town of Sexsmith, Aquaterra, the construction association, sort of et cetera. And so there were notes sort of taken and circulated amongst all the attendees. And it was really, I think, well attended and very well worth the morning, I think, for us to attend. It was really good.
I think the notes had 16 participants. I think I counted 18 actually there, but the variety of engagement from different stakeholders in the community really speaks to the diversity in Grand Prairie. You know, there's business, there's nonprofits like us and public sector employers, and so much commonality, you know, when it comes to one, celebrating Grand Prairie as a city of opportunity, but two, needing to attract people to continue to make that professional investment in Grand Prairie was something we talked about, was something other school jurisdictions, the Polytechnic, businesses, county, city, it's a consistent message. It's good.
Any questions for Vice Chair Cook on that? Well, thank you both for representing us on that one. Individual trustee reports. I'll start with you.
Nothing, thank you.
No? Trustee Martin? Trustee Lucia?
I appreciated the letter on charter schools with Montessori focus, vocational focus. I appreciated that letter very much. Has there been any feedback from government?
So we're coming back to that actually as an agenda item today to talk about, but our submission deadline isn't for a couple more days. And so it was presented to trustees for information, and we're going to actually have it as an agenda item at the end of the superintendent's report to talk about why that letter looks the way it looks and our intent about submitting it. So.
Perfect. I've noticed that past one meetings that this is a point of advocacy by Vice President Shalley at ASBA. They've switched their tactics from no, please don't build charter schools in our area to, okay, well, I guess charter schools are here to stay. Can we talk about the process? Can you not put them in areas where the public school system already has the programs the charter school is proposing to offer? And this seems like they weren't listening.
Yeah, we'll get back to that here. In
I have a point related directly to that, Trustee Buziak, that is interesting, and it's a little bit about how legislation exists to allow the minister to approve things outside of the way it's described, but I'll talk a little bit about that.
Last week I went to my school council meeting at Avondale and I got a little surprise there through Apple Schools, the young lady that runs Apple Schools. I talked last month about their students trying different foods and things like that. So she put in Avondale's name into a organization through the Toronto Blue Jays, and Avondale received, I believe, 12 or 15 ball gloves, medium size, and they have the Blue Jays logo on them.
Okay.
Then they received 15 smaller ones. Also with the Blue Jays, they received balls, they received bats, bag to put them all in, all through the Toronto Blue Jays organization. They also received home plate first, second, and third. And this stuff, we went and looked at it, it is gorgeous. It is unbelievable.
That's great.
How nice it is, yeah. Yeah, so.
Things we learned at board meetings.
Yeah, so it was, yeah, it's very cool to see that they received those,
Yeah, that's great.
sports equipment.
Nice.
Trustee Johnston?
Uh.
All right. Well, then we will move on to superintendent's report.
Yeah, so today it's the deputy superintendent's report.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you said get out. So really the point, the report is submitted for your information. I do want to highlight some important items out of there, and then of course invite the opportunity for any questions you might have. Under the first section, which is high school meeting, and that's a distinct meeting we have with our high schools. Based on the distinct nature of high schools. We actually on a regular basis meet with our high school principals to share, to really create opportunities for them to work together and for us to talk about the work we do as a system. And one of the things that we spent some significant time at the last meeting with talking about was the dual credit opportunities that exist currently for students through a partnership, not just with Northwestern Polytechnic, but with the other school divisions as well. This will figure into the conversation we're going to have about charter schools in a few minutes as well. But you'll see a significant increase in dual credit opportunities available starting at the beginning of next year for students, and widening the access in program areas to include the business department, education department, health, humanities, and trades areas. And we've always had dual credit. We've always had a really good partnership, but we've always had a bit of friction about the incompatibility of between our system and college system, the post-secondary system. Our semesters don't line up, our days don't line up, and our classes don't line up. So the opportunity for a student to be able to take a dual credit opportunity was somewhat limited because of just those factors. Our day doesn't look like the Polytechnic's day. And so that's been scrubbed to the side with some really good work from the Polytechnic saying we need to make this a priority, because having students having that opportunity in dual credit to be able to earn university credits for potentially for transfer to program while they're in high school is important. And so the way they facilitate that is they've designed a number of courses that are now asynchronous, meaning you don't have to physically attend it at the same time, which was always the fall down point of dual credit. And they've made a commitment to having asynchronous learning, and where there is synchronous learning required to augment what happens, it's outside of the regular school day. So it can be an evening or a weekend, and students will have an opportunity to do those university coursework in a much more robust way. And so that's something I wanted to highlight in here, because it's a shift in accessibility to programming, and we're going to see that grow in the next few years as students suddenly can actually really do a variety of different courses in different disciplines. And I think that's something we're celebrating with that.
Just from my understanding, sir.
Yep.
When you say asynchronous, like, do you mostly mean like online, like there?
Some of it's online, some of it is with a professor, but it's in the absence of having scheduled class time. So online is the primary way. So they're using Moodle servers, which is a server device that allows online course facilitation.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So that's what it is. And we have courses that we're working on with them as well. So it's really been a significant investment, but something that we're really excited about. This is what dual credit should look like. So exciting. Quick update on summer school. Last year proved that the concept of summer school would work, and this year it comes back bigger than ever. And you'll see in the report some different courses that are being offered, and dual credit and our summer programming kind of work side by side with each other. And so those things are identified as key things we talked about at our high school meeting. So I really highlight summer school because it's something we do really well.
I noticed that there was an information session, a virtual information center session about the dual credit. Was there much pickup on that, or?
There was some, right? And our opportunity is to bring it back to students, right?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to get people to attend things, even though it should appeal to people. Some of that was recorded, but our work with our high school counselors is to help connect kids to those opportunities, to highlight what they don't see necessarily as an opportunity. So there was that engagement and there was participation, but we really need an opportunity to get it to every student in our division. And it's not just us, it's partnered with Peace Wapiti and with the Grand Prairie and District Catholic schools as well. So those opportunities are equitable across the city. And again, that's a strength of Grand Prairie. So
That's absolutely great. I wonder, and I remember hearing when we were talking about option classes and programming at schools, that parents play a very big role in helping kids choose what their path is or what that looks like. So finding some way to reach those parents would also be
absolutely
hard, but but
that lends itself to the next item I wanted to highlight, which is on page 2 of the report, which is career pathways, tentatively titled Choose Your Own Adventure. And that's a reference, if you remember, the books in elementary school where you got to pick page 48 or 62 and choose your own adventure. But appreciation to Director Kim Frickus and Principal Dennis Bolbeta for their work on capturing for our division career pathways. And so those tentatively titled Choose Your Own Adventure, and that's a reference, if you remember, the books in elementary school where you got to pick page 48 or 62 and choose your own adventure. But appreciation to Director Kim Frickus and Principal Dennis Bolbeta for their work on career pathways as an embedded practice from preschool all the way to grade 12. And what it is largely the coordination of things that already happen, but highlighting the importance of career awareness for all students throughout grade level. So it's not something when you get to high school that you start thinking about the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And start making choices that throughout your school experience, whether you're in grade 1, grade 4, or grade 6, you've had developmentally appropriate opportunities to learn about the world of work, careers, post-secondary, and those sorts of things. And so the work that they've done is really exciting. They're coming on May 13th to actually present it to you. And it's an impressive coordination of a lot of different things, but it really is about that outcome of awareness and ensuring that students are thinking about what their future looks like. And, you know, the phrase is a phrase that's existed since time immemorial. Keeping doors open is what this is about. And so helping students make good choices and understanding what different pathways might yield and those sorts of things. So their work is tremendously important. As we speak, they're actually at the Composite High School tonight hosting an open house. And that's for parents to come and learn about dual credit opportunities, to learn about off campus, to learn about some of the other things that happen in our schools. And then it's an opportunity for us to engage with industry. And so Vice Chair Cook had a chance to talk at the council or the chamber roundtable about the importance of having industry providing feedback to us about our pathways and where they see those partnerships strengthening and those sorts of things. So that's where they are tonight, and they'll be here on the 13th of May to talk to us about that. But it's the right work. So any questions about that?
Just a good guy.
It's not about that, it's just, I was asleep when you were talking about summer school, and I had a question about that.
You have to go to summer
Let's
school.
go back to that.
Please.
Attention.
It's attention deficit disorder. Yes, that's right. I've mentioned the summer school at a couple of school council meetings I've been at, and the parents are genuinely excited about it. I really appreciate that being there. I have a question about insurance though, since the programs occur outside the school year. Is it necessary to make any adjustments to insurance to cover the kids while they're at the Bridge Network or wherever else out in the community doing this?
And so not one at the Bridge Network, because it's one of our schools. And then Associate Superintendent Liddell can jump in, but there is a consideration for insurance when they're off campus. And so our phys ed program we're offering is an in-person phys ed program. It's primarily going to be at one of our high schools, but there will be some things they do off-site, but the change to insurance is negligible when it comes to doing those things, because they are students in programming at our schools. Our existing insurance covers it. We just have to make sure that, like any program, that you make people aware that you're doing something different, and that's something that we do. So we've got actually a summer school program. There's not any kind of wilderness adventure, but they are going hiking in Muskogee Park and that sort of thing. So there's not a change in cost for us that way. There was a note in the report about a fee around physical education, and there is a participation or fee that's associated with it, because some of the activities they do have cost related to it, and it's quite nominal. It's under $50 to be able to take the intensive phys ed program, but that's when we have to rent equipment or go participate in things like golfing and that sort of thing to help offset that. So that's where that is. And that's not a barrier for students. If students have trouble with that, we certainly have ways of accommodating students who are unable to pay fees. So there is no barrier that way. We're excited though, because the summer school last year demonstrated the viability of having summer school expand. And so this year there is more programming being offered, and we look to expand it in the future. And you're right, parents should be excited, because I think we think of summer school sometimes in the sense of old 1980s movies where you get sentenced to summer school. And there's a bit of recovery, credit recovery that happens. Students who don't quite get a course completed can go and complete. But it is an acceleration program for our students who are in high school. Here's a chance for a really intensive period to earn 3 course credits in a certain area, and that frees up your time in the semester to either take other things you want to take, or for some students to finish high school faster than they typically would. So we see summer school as an acceleration and also a remediation for students who need it. But if people are talking about it, we talk about it from the possibility perspective. It's a good thing. Changes to privacy legislation. So I had a chance last week, and I've got another chance coming up to attend a session with Brownlee Legal, and they're basically talking about changes to FOIP. And you hear us talk lots about FOIP, which is freedom of information and privacy. We're going to have to dehabituize ourselves away from talking about FOIP because we do it so comfortably. It's been around since 1999. And so I didn't know that until we started kind of learning about Bill 33 and Bill 34. So they have two bills that have passed through the legislature that talk about one, responsibilities around protecting people's privacy, and then Bill 30, that's 33, and 34 looks at how you access information, right? Which is kind of what part of VoIP was in those senses. So they have two different pieces of legislation. To be honest, it's one of those things where the legislation is passed, the regulations have not yet been established, and that's where the details that are most important to us will come in. So the session we attended the other day, the first presenter spoke and said that they anticipate in April or May having the regulations in place, and his partner spoke and said that they anticipated it in June and July, right later on. And so within that webinar, the timeline had already extended. So when it does, our team has been very active in that, learning around what our responsibilities are around protecting privacy. 1999 looked different in terms of digital footprints and those sorts of things. And there are some really good things in privacy management expectations and things like that I think will be good for our jurisdiction. So.
I think, just to jump in on that. So a couple of people from the IT department are also attending ATLE on Thursday and Friday, just to look on the IT side of things, and the privacy and how the legislation kind of impacts schools from an IT perspective. So there shall be a couple of members will be in that instance, just to get more information on this topic.
So we've got a lot of kind of hands in it. You know, privacy impact assessments are now something we're required to do, and that's good work, right? Let's talk about how we collect information, why we collect information, how we store it, and what the purpose is. And so I think from that will be some good work for our jurisdiction. And the last thing I want to talk about with the superintendent's report is just a quick update on Peace Collaborative Services, and it's provided for information in the report. But I share that because our division has had a long-standing connection to PCS long before it was called Peace Collaborative Services. If you go back decades, there's been that GPAT and GPIT model and of consolidated services for students by professional staff. And so the general update is that PCS is thriving and going very well. We have a new manager in place, and there's always a transition of somebody new coming in. And Elizabeth Linfield is most recently was a principal with the Peace Wapiti School Division. And so in the regional manager, we've got somebody who has an education focus, and it brings a different lens to Peace Collaborative Services. In terms of being able to look at things from a process and procedure perspective. So she spent a lot of time this year kind of saying, okay, we do this, but we don't actually have a way of recording why we do what we do. And so she's helping build process and procedure. And I want to give a special thanks to the leadership team from all of the divisions that support the regional manager and the work of Peace Collaborative Services. In our context, Nancy Gorgachuk is our representative on the leadership committee, and each one of the partners has somebody that sits on that committee, and it is active and involved in providing the leadership for PCS in a way that I've not seen in a long time. And it really is, the C is collaborative, and the collaborative nature of Peace Collaborative Services is evident. And so that's something I really want to celebrate. The second thing, we've talked lots about the challenge around recruiting professional support staff, and it's still ongoing, but they've had more luck in the last year in recruiting people to positions than we have in the past. We still have a fair bit of reliance on contractors, but there's something going on in the province that's impacting us positively. And that's that the province supports FSCD. You'll hear that acronym sometimes, and that's family supports for children with disabilities. And what that program does is provide money to families to hire specialized services to support their children. And the province has made some significant reductions in what that funding looks like. It's not a good thing for families. Where we get a benefit from it is that a lot of our employees who decided not to be employees decided to be contractors because of the flexibility and the increased compensation sometimes that came with FSCD contracts are now finding themselves without contracts and are obligated to come back to work, so to speak. And so we're having people who are making the choice to say, you know what, being on my own is not as appealing as I thought it was. I'd rather be an employee. And so we're having more luck with recruiting professional staff. And so a benefit to us at the challenge to families. And we just note that as something that's impacted PCS from a staffing perspective.
Is it fair to say that sounds a bit like a mini voucher system?
A little bit, you know, it's existed for a long time. Families are funded, and they do have that ability to use it for different things in therapy. There's parameters around what they can use it for, but it is to buy services. You're right. Yeah, outside of the education system. So they can't buy services to be applied to their children at school. It's for supports outside of the education system in the home is typically what happens.
Is there somebody out there that helps them navigate the services that are available? How do they get connected with the services? How do they find out about them?
I don't know the answer to that question. You know, you're asking as an individual family, how do they know what to do?
Who to go to?
Yeah, I would think that probably, you know, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how they would know who to go to and how to do that work. You know, for the longest time, there was a private organization in Grand Prairie, which was Function First, right, which provided services for families. They've changed their business model a little bit too, because of these changes in funding. And so the ripple effect is evident to families, and that's, you know, in Grand Prairie, and if you're a student in the Grand Prairie Public School Division, you have access to some services. I feel for those families that are outside of the city and have only this as their only kind of connection to specialized services, and not a great thing in the province for kids with the needs.
Any other questions for Deputy
Yeah.
Superintendent on that report, or any of your points that he had in there? I can,
Kind of keep going?
yeah,
Okay, if it's okay, I want to flip those two items that are items for discussion or action and talk about our Edwin Parr nominee before we talk about the charter school. And so pleased to take this opportunity to present administration's nominee for this year's Edwin Parr Award, representing the Grand Prairie Public School Division in the zone. And so this year's recommended nominee is Eily Estrada, who is a grade 5 teacher at Hillside Community School. A bit of a different process for us this year, and I'll describe what typically happens and then why this year is a little bit different. And it was an exciting opportunity for us is how I'll describe it, because it's a little bit different. And so this is the first time in the years that I've been with the division that we've had competing nominees for the role for the Edwin Parr nomination. And so what will happen typically, as you know, first-year teachers are eligible to be nominated as the Edwin Parr nominee. And I will begin the year by having a list of our first-year teachers, and I'll start talking to schools about their first-year teachers and ask whether they think they have a candidate who is a good candidate to be a nominee. And schools right off the bat will know whether they have really good candidates or not. But typically what happens is they will amongst themselves kind of determine who has the strongest candidate. And one school will put forward that candidate as the candidate of choice that we make a recommendation to be Edwin Parr nominee. We've had excellent teachers over the last number of years who have been nominated through that process, which kind of happened naturally and has always happened over the years. This year's different because for the first time we had two schools put their hands up and say, I have a number one. And the other school said, so do I. And in talking to people, it became clear that there was not a clear selection to be made without a bit of a process. And so we had to build a process on the fly to make a determination of which of those two excellent teachers would become the one nominee, because you could only have one nominee. And so thanks very much to Director Crean Cruz and one of our vice principals, Brian Maya, who put together a process that makes sense. They spent some time observing classroom teaching practices, and then they spent some time asking and interviewing teachers about their practice. And so they had an opportunity to spend 30 minutes in a classroom observing what they were observing, talk to principals about why they made the recommendation, and then spend time with the individual teachers, talking to them about their planning, their assessment, their just the different elements of the teaching quality standard. And so they were able to come away from that and say, wow, we have excellent candidates here, but there can only be one nominee. And so they selected Eily Estrada, as I mentioned, grade 5 from Hillside Community School. So in a minute, I'm going to call for a nomination, and Ms. Westwater has the motion. Thanks. That's the hard word I couldn't find. Has the motion ready to go. But before we actually talk about Eily being the candidate, I'd like to be able to talk about the runner-up candidate, if I could. And to advise the board, I sent her a thank you note. I had a chance to run into her at the school and talk to her as well. And we're blessed to have teachers who are as strong as these two young people in our system. So Emily Baker teaches grade 2 at Derek Taylor Public School. Her mother works for us as well. So there's a bit of a family history of education in the family. She's an excellent beginning teacher, and we're very fortunate to have her having also been nominated, but in this case not selected as the division's nominee for that. But I did want to take this moment in our meeting to highlight Emily Baker as well as an excellent teacher. And so a little bit about Eily, tremendous strength, dynamic, inclusive lessons. Right off the bat, the team that went in to see her said, you wouldn't think that you're talking about a first-year teacher when you have an opportunity to observe the quality of the planning and the inclusiveness and the different ways of engaging students who have different learning styles. Planning was exceptional and really having great relationships, not just with kids and on staff, but with parents and those sorts of things as well. And so I'm very pleased to have Eiley be the recommended nominee for Edwin Park for our school jurisdiction. Any questions? That's a roundabout way of talking about two excellent teachers, and we were thrilled to have the opportunity to have to make a choice this way.
Yeah, just happy to hear that there's
Yeah.
great teachers. Can you hear the proposed motion?
Yes, moved by trustee that the board approve Ailey Estrada, grade 5 teacher at Hillside Community School as the division's 2024 to 2025 nominee, the Zone 1 Edwin Parr Teacher Award.
Someone will make that motion, trustee Martin? Any discussion on that motion? No, then we'll call the question. All those in favor? Well, we are happy to congratulate her on that. That is fantastic news, and can't wait to celebrate her with the other nominees at our Zone 1 meeting in the fall. That's great.
Excited.
Thanks for that.
Good. Next topic is the response to the charter school proposed for Grand Prairie. So including your package is a submission prepared by administration, which is a response to a recent application for a charter school in Grand Prairie. The submission is presented for your information, but because of the nature of the topic, I would seek feedback from trustees and an opportunity in a public meeting to talk about our position relative to the application that we're going to talk about a little bit. So by way of background, as you're aware, an organization from Edmonton was interested in starting a charter school venture in Grand Prairie, and that's been kind of in the works for a little while. Identified as the Grand Prairie Technical Institute, they describe themselves as a Montessori-based, trades-focused experiential learning site for K-12 students. In March, we received official notice that they had filed a formal application to establish a charter venture in Grand Prairie. And part of that process is that we get an opportunity to offer our thoughts on that matter and through a written submission. And so collaboratively, we developed the response that was included in your board package. And I want to go through and touch a little bit on the highlights of why the letter looks the way it looks and what we were trying to achieve in that, and then really seek feedback from you about that. So looking at the response, the theme that we most wanted to make clear, and I think it's evident in there, is that choice exists in the Grand Prairie Public School Division. It's foundational to us. One of the lines that's in that letter is that choice permeates our division, and that's the truth. We took the opportunity to highlight the variety of different programming that's offered, and we did that because of a couple of things. One, it demonstrates that we listen, right? When we engage with parents and we see opportunities to meet needs of parents in unique ways, we do that because with choice goes innovation. They're hand in hand, and one of the significant hallmarks of the Grand Prairie Public School Division, and I've noticed this since I worked with it. I was impressed when I first started working with the division 13 years ago. The variety of opportunities that exist for students is astounding, and it's driven by choice and it's driven by innovation. And so the intent of the letter is to say choice drives the work that we do. Innovation is at the core of our practice. And those two things really do go hand in hand. We have Montessori programming in our division because that's what people wanted, right? In engaging with people and understanding going back many years, it was evident that there was an interest in that type of programming. And so we have that because choice is important. We made it happen because we believe in innovation. So choice and innovation exist. And you can say the same thing with French immersion, our IB programming, academy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? It's at the heart of the work we do. And the third theme that we wanted to bring to the forefront in that letter really was the importance of community and partnerships. Grand Prairie is unique in how partnerships exist in the city between education bodies. Our ability to work with our post-secondary, but also with our partner school boards is not common in the province. And our ability to do that is because in Grand Prairie, relationships matter. And so the intent of the letter was to talk about choice, innovation, and relationships. That's at the heart of the Grand Prairie Public School Division. Because we believe in choice and innovation and partnerships, it's evident that we offer everything that is proposed by the charter school in a public school setting. And so that already exists. And that was our way, was trying to demonstrate that it already exists, that it's already offered. What's important is the end of the letter. There's two parts to the end of the submission. And one part is making the statement that we offer everything that's proposed by the charter school and then more. Because if you're a student in the Grand Prairie Public School Division or in the Peace Wapiti School Division or in the Grand Prairie and District Catholic School Division, you can do everything that's offered in the programming and explore other passions. You can be somebody who's interested in trades and fine arts, trades and phys ed, trades and the academy. If you want to be a welder who plays the flute, you can do that at the Grand Prairie Composite High School. And so the point of that is that opportunities exist that can't be replicated by single purpose ventures. And that's the intent of our submissions, to say we provide choice for students. And then the very last paragraph has some fairly strong language in it about the purpose of our belief relative to what we believe the purpose of charter schools is, and that charter schools don't cause innovation. We do. We engage with our community, we innovate, we do that naturally. And we don't do that for any other reason other than it's good for our community. And so charters dilute, in our perspective, learning opportunities for students because they're narrowly focused on singular things. You can go and take a trades focus in a school that's established like a charter school is, and you limit yourself from playing on sports teams in a league that you would have in a city. You don't have the rich opportunity to engage in all of the other things that a publicly funded education program like Grand Prairie Composite High School and Charles Spencer offers. And our submission is basically fundamentally found around choice. And so that's why it exists looking the way it looks.
That's great. I appreciate that you got on your soapbox for that, because I think it's very important to the work that we're doing and to the work that we're doing as a public school division. Does anyone have any thoughts or edits or advice for the letter that hasn't already been that you're not seeing there, Trustee or Vice Chair?
Maybe it's just sort of queries. When is the official date of this language change from charter to?
That's undecided yet.
It's private to independent.
Yeah,
It's not charter.
It's not charter. Charter still exists.
Yeah, my charge. Yeah, great. And then I wonder, does it make any, was there any thought to CC our partners? Because we make reference to the Catholic system and Peace Wapiti. Would we CC them, or would
We prefer, if that's the will of the board, and likewise ASBA and PSBA as well for their information.
I just thought because we're talk about our partnership,
Mhm.
whether we would want to include them in the CC.
I don't think that Peace Wapiti would have an opportunity to respond to this because they're technically, they're geographically not impacted, but I do know that our partners in the Catholic School Division received the same opportunity, and I've talked to them about what our approach was, and yes.
Maybe you can make the connection yourself, but in the lead up to the last provincial election, we sat down with the two UCP candidates here and we talked to them about charter schools. And the comment from one of them, Mr. Weeb, was that competition is a good thing. It makes us all better. So I guess that's my question is, when you were writing the letter, did you have in the back of your mind this idea of their belief that competition is a good thing and that approving this charter school here is going to introduce competition and that's good for Grand Prairie?
Yeah, and that's the intent of kind of the closing, is to emphasize that I use innovation in this, right? Because that's the argument that sometimes is made. Innovation comes from private ventures that cause improvements in the system. And so when I talk about in the letter, we create innovation. Charter schools don't incentivize us to innovate. We already do this work. And so that was, for that purpose, was to say that, you know, if the thinking is that this will improve things generally, our argument is we don't believe it does, because what it does in this case is replicate things that already exist in the city, but also create really limited pathways for students who are going to go down a pathway of having single purpose programming exposure. So I'm sensitive to that as well, the idea, the belief that charter schools create opportunities they don't accept.
When you asked me to edit and comment on this before submission, I went and looked at all of the legislation around the reasons for charter schools. And in this letter, I believe each one of those reasons was reasoned out. right? There's, looking at this, every piece had, okay, that's where we address this, that's where we address that. So, I think it's a powerful letter, and I think it says what it needs to say.
Just to a point that trustee Buziak made earlier about, one of the conditions being, and it is in the regulations that guide the approval of charter schools, is that the minister would not approve schools if it can be demonstrated that programming already exists provided by public school boards or public schools. And I'll get the numbers wrong, but if that's statement 2 in that regulation, statement 3 is notwithstanding 2, if it's a vocational school, we can approve to have multiple in the same jurisdiction. And so by a charter school application, including that they have a vocational focus, cleverly kind of eliminate the ability for the minister to say no because they have a vocational focus that is kind of given an exemption almost. So.
Trustee Orlett?
Love the letter, especially the last part of it where on choice and cause innovation. I think it's great to send out, and I would even suggest CCing our local MLA.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
I can't think of a reason not to keep them in the loop on it.
Yeah. Good idea.
Just remember your hand up?
No, I was gonna explain, I kind of wanted to say what you did with why, because I remember them talking about the reason why charter schools can come in. And I felt it was a good letter that did answer a lot of the same things you already spoke about, so, yeah.
Trustee Johnson?
Do you see an impact on staffing here? I happened to run into a former teacher colleague of mine a few months ago who said he was approached, and he's a CTS teacher. He was approached to potentially teach in a charter school, and maybe this one. So do you think there's going to be impacts? Are they going to poach our staff or?
I don't know the answer to that. I've thought about that. You know, they would have to have some significant incentivization to cause a teacher to want to move from a publicly funded school system to a charter school system, which has different rules around membership and those sorts of things. So maybe I'm optimistic or overly optimistic, but I think that they'll have a hard time recruiting active teachers to make that decision to change. It is something to consider.
Trustee Johnson?
Oh, no, I just want to say I really like the letter. I think that you guys did a really good job laying out the choice that exists in the system and really what we're able to offer the community. Hopefully demonstrating that there is a need for it, but no, I just wanted to thank you for putting in that effort.
Outside of the purpose of the letter, it was a tremendous reflection activity for us. We know these things, but when you start laying it out about choice and why choice exists, and I think about those programs, like the French immersion program in Grand Prairie is 30 years old or older. That exists because people long before us thought that was important, right? Montessori programming came from parents saying, hey, could we start a Montessori school? And the Yes We Can school division said, yes, we can. That's tremendous. This is a great organization that way. Sorry.
Is it typical for, like, this organization is out of Edmonton? Is it typical for them to come into other communities?
I think it's opportunity because there is not we have a fairly robust economy and a population base, and it's an opportunity to establish ourselves in an area where it doesn't already exist.
So, Deputy Superintendent, I heard a few more CCs on that.
Yeah.
But other than that, the tone and the content is great, so appreciate that.
Love the tone.
Yeah, it moves strong.
And back to you, no. Associate Superintendent Orlett.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of quick updates. So the first one's on Jordan's principle. I think it's not necessarily a secret that the funding is going away. So from the next school year, we're using about $1.8 million funded for Jordan's principle. So what that means is about 56 EAs that are currently with the divisions will not have their contract renewed come end of June, which is unfortunate. But again, the report does talk to the reason and the rationale behind in Just Canada making that decision, just given the volume of applications that they've received over the last few years that the program's been in place. So I think they're just going away to focusing on, I guess, the true intent of what the program is all about. So what's happening now as part of our budget process, and we're looking to see, of if there are any of those EAs that could be retained in other capacities within the division, just because the funding is going away, the need doesn't go away, right? And that's something that the Superintendent Robinson and his team are working on to see what that could look like from a funding and a budget perspective. So we have communicated with the EAs that are involved. I think last week, I believe we sent that communication to them as well as the parents as well, just so they know that the changes and then they can start planning that accordingly. So we just need to give you an update if you have any questions or thoughts.
So Jordan's principal funding comes about as a result of a court case, is that correct?
Yes.
And so if they're cutting the funding, does that mean there are applications in place that aren't consistent with the court judgment?
That's the impression that we get from our conversations with individuals Canada, in terms of some jurisdiction that might have used the funding for other programs not as intended. So I think they're really trying to just focus on the core.
I think the best way to describe it is they're going back to the intended purpose of the settlement that came out of the court case. And so Jordan Rivers Anderson was a young boy who was lived on reserve and was caught between systems. A very ill child, had very significant health issues and was in a hospital. And the tragedy of his case is that people fought between federal and provincial and territorial type funding to bounce him around like he wasn't a person, and then tried to say that other people were responsible for paying, and he ended up dying before he was ever able to go home. And he spent his entire 3 or 4 years of life living in a hospital waiting to try and go home because nobody accepted responsibility for him, because there's always jurisdictional dispute between on reserve federal programs and off reserve. So just different tension. So this court case was established, and this commission found the need to make sure that those situations don't happen. And so the intent of it was to create for Indigenous students equitable opportunities so that they don't get caught in these systems. To be honest, I understand why they made the decision they made recently, because while it had a core purpose, it became everything to everybody in lots of different ways and was, I don't know how to describe it other than oversubscribed to. And so jurisdictions were, and we're not guilty of this, but jurisdictions were funding significant numbers of their staff, like, 52 or 54 or 56, whatever our number is a big number, but it doesn't account for 90% of our staff, like some of the partner school jurisdictions in this province and across the country use that funding for. So they really needed to rein in what it looked like. And they made the decision to say the purpose of it still exists, but it only applies to kids who live on reserve and are caught in significant intergovernmental conflict. And so where it's used for school divisions to hire human resources to support students, they're saying that's not consistent with the original purpose, and we're going back to what that is. I understand why they did that. The implication to us is that we have a lot of kids who have a lot of support, that we need to find other ways to support them. And so the work that Nancy does, Director Gorgachuk is doing, is actually looking at those kids in our system and what supports they need, and coming back and saying, we think we can make this work by increasing our EA allocation this much. It can't be 56 people. We just can't do that. One of the things that Associate Superintendent Oladelli mentioned is trying to retain some of the amazing staff that we've hired along the way in this journey who need to continue to work for us because of their skills with young people. And so we're keeping people and we're trying to find the right fits. And it's a bit of a juggling game right now, and we try to meet the needs of students. We're looking right now at attendance, right, is something we're curious about. You know, did we see an increase in students who had Jordan's Principal EAs because there was a person connected to them that made them come to school? And our initial look is, yep, it looks like there was. What do we do about that when we don't have EAs in some of those situations? So there's lots kind of afoot with it. The technical bit of things is they have said, and what I appreciate is that they are applying it firmly and consistently, that in public school settings, in provincially funded schools, we will not, under any circumstances, fund positions. They've also said parents cannot apply individually for that anymore either. They've really drawn a line and they have to. And so we're picking up those pieces of those things. Yeah.
There was years ago, a trustee who was a lawyer also. And he told us that there's always worthy exceptions. And that's the reason why people have lawyers, is to find the worthy exceptions.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere in here, is there a worthy exception? Can we make application?
We asked the question, and so the person we talked to said, since this change has been made, there has been one exception approved across the country, and there's been lots of people asking for exemptions or alternative solutions, and the answer has been consistently no. And they've said, we apologize. This is a hard line that we have to take. Now, tomorrow there's an opportunity with PSBA to have an engagement opportunity around that group coalescing, kind of saying, we need to continue to lobby for this to look differently. And there are some school jurisdictions individually that are doing that as well, because they have different relationships with on reserve students than we do, right? They have funding agreements for reserve-based students to be in their schools. And they're saying, it's not right that this doesn't work. So I think there is some moves afoot. I don't think it will achieve much by appealing when they've said, we are going to say no. If you spend some time just Googling Jordan's Principal in news stories, you'll see some of the egregious things that were, not egregious if that's the right word, but some things that are questionable that were approved under the program, not by school jurisdictions, but just in general. And you can understand why they really needed to hit a reset button on what it looked like, because it was moves in lots of ways.
Any other questions on that? Did you have anything this morning?
No, sir, I think he knows everything else.
Just let him, he's being sandy.
No, it's, you know, I mean, to trustee Buziak's point, it is not something that we kind of accept as a, oh, well, and, you know, it's significant and significant to families. And so our connection, we've communicated with staff, and then we've had principals communicate to parents. And our next step is to follow up personally, right? We've got this communication. Here's what it means, because it's a significant withdrawal of human resources in the division.
Think that we've been at this for just over 2 hours. Does anyone need a break, or are we fixed? It's just a. Yeah. We'll take a 5-minute recess before restart then. So we'll come back at 8:17. All right, we'll call this meeting back to order at 8:18 p.m. Moving back to you, Associate Superintendent Oladelli.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to give you a brief update on the funding profile that we received. So we got the profile in March, towards the end of March. Same with the funding manual that kind of details what the funding profile, what our profile is all about. So our funding profile basically talks about, it's very specific on how much we get as a school division. And then the funding manual just gives a lot of details on each of the funding areas. So the biggest change for this school year is the province is moving away from the weighted average moving method for calculating our grants, and they're moving to adjusted enrollment method, which is basically 70% of projection and 30% on current year. So for next year, what that means is 30% of our funding would be based on what we got on our enrollment for this year, and then 70% would be what we projected would happen enrollment from September to June next year. So we did submit that in January. That's when it was due to the ministry. So that's what they used to calculate what our funding would be. So we're looking at about 4.1% increase over this year, or just under $3.9 million. The biggest increase there, and the report does have details on specific on some of the areas, but the biggest increase there is on the base instruction. So that goes from ECS to grade 12, where we're seeing $1.7 million increase there. Majority of that is from the high school, grade 9 to 12 in our case, with about 60% of the increase, or just about just over $1 million in grade funding for the high school. And again, that's based on our projection for what we think was going to happen next year, and also the growth that we've seen the last few years as well. So that's affected that increase. The second part, services and support, that's where you have your SLS, POF, and the First Nation grants, as well as the refugee. So one of the major change this year was combining the SLS for severe kindergarten students. They combined that with the POF funding. And what that meant, if you look at, so I'll step back. If you look at the POF line, just on its own, it went up by about $790,000. But because they combined it, the SLS, they combined it with the POF, we only saw a minimal increase of about $1,200. So
About what, sorry?
$1,200. So there wasn't.
Right hand gives, left hand takes.
Right. And I think at the last board meeting, we had talked about writing the letter, or spreading the letter on the funding, and we are set to hold up just to give us some time to look at the funding manual and the funding profile. And I think that would probably be warranted now, just given how minimal the increase is with the combination that by them combining the two programs. So that's just a something to just point out.
May I ask a clarifying question? I'm wondering if administration has any idea on why they combined that grant? Was there reasoning that you know of or can see?
Not that was apparent. So just reading through the funding manual, it was just said it was just that it was combined, and I think we could follow up to get a rationale as to why, but I think the manual just said it was combined. So. But with other funding within this the programs and support services, did see some increased funding of just about $300,000. So those will be the other targeted grants like the FMNI and the First Nation grants, the additional language and the refugee, so which is pretty decent of an increase, but it was about $300,000. So overall, year over year, those two, that program went up by $735,000, but again, that's mostly, sorry, excuse me. So that's on the targeted grant for the complexity, FMNI, EAL, and refugee. And then there was also the actual SLS itself, which is this specialized learning support. So let me go back. So there are two SLS programs. There's one that's just regular SLS, and there was a separate one that was just for severe kindergarten students. So the one that went away was the severe kindergarten student that went away. But the actual, the 1 to 12 stayed, and that one did go up by $300,000 as well. So that's where the variance is coming from, is the SLS from 1 to 12, and then the other targeted grants for complexity and EAL and FMNI. So those two together make up the majority of the $735,000 increase in our funding.
So to be clear, are you referring to that classroom complexity grant? If that's where that SLS for 1 to 12 is?
No, I was just saying.
That's a separate line.
That's a separate line, yes.
Okay.
So that one went up by $98,000. The classroom complexity went up by $98,000. Any other clarifying questions on that? And then the school-based grants went up by $1.3 million, and there are two major new funding program in this area. So the first one is the school technology grant. So what they've done is combined the SuperNet money that we currently get, and they've combined that with a brand new funding program, just called the technical support grant, right? So that's just to support school divisions with cybersecurity and just emerging things that they're seeing within the school divisions and IT. So both of those grants combined is now about $300,000 that we're getting. Last year was about $192,000. So it's pretty relatively significant increase.
Ola, in the past, you've reported to us that SuperNet is costing quite a bit more than we're getting in funding. So what's the picture look like now?
Yeah, so looking at what they've sent, so SuperNet itself went up by 5%, right? So of the $300,000, we got 192 last year, we got a 5% increase to SuperNet, right? Which for us, it doesn't completely cover our cost, but it just eats away at how much we have to subsidize that program. And I think the board's done some advocacy work. I think, and since I've been here, just to get that to increase, but it's about 5% increase to SuperNet was what we saw.
Well, that's the first increase it's had.
Right.
So
But you're saying it does not cover the cost.
No, it doesn't cover the cost 100%. But I think with just speaking with the director of IT, just having that technical support brand that they've created does help the division, just given the size of organization compared to other jurisdictions. I think there are some things that there were some gaps that he's identified, and I think that the new grant should help fill those gaps. I just speaking with him last week on that. The O&M grant went up by $900,000, but a big part of that was a newly created section for that. That's called supplemental rural grants, which is about $538,000. Again, that's just due to I guess rural and urbanness. I guess so that's why we got the additional funding. But with that though, we did lose the supplemental enrollment grant. So every year we got $250,000 a year for supplemental enrollment. Also, that's gone away. But then they've also given $138,000. So again, it's a net increase. And lastly, the O&M grant went up by $900,000. Yeah, so that's included in the operational maintenance. But again, I think from an O&M perspective, that's significant. It doesn't cover all our expenses, but I think it does go a long way. And one of the things we're also doing right now is with the carbon tax midway from April 1st, just seeing what difference that would make into our budget for next year. If we'll see any significant increase, a big reduction in expenses. So that's something we're working with our energy consultants to see how that would impact us next year.
So what's the effect of inflation on all of this? Got a 4.1% increase, but inflation's running at what, 2 right now? And I think that's been one of our points of advocacy in the past, these inflationary costs.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with the grant rate itself, where there hasn't been any increase for quite a while. And I think last year, July last year, they did increase the grant rates quite a bit. And what they've done this year was they've maintained the one that they increased last year. So prior to last year, there has been no increase to grant rates. But in July, there was a bit of an increase. Now, for us specifically as a division, I think that's one thing that we'll have to work on. At the school level and also at the department level, right? To see, because we do allocate the budgets to the schools and administration just to figure out what their budget looks like. And I think they can just kind of plan for what that looks like. But we haven't given a general 2% increase to everybody, right? For inflation, right? Just because we do know 70% of our budget is people. Right, so and those are relatively fixed costs in terms of we know what the increases would be, we know what our benefit increase would be, we know what CRA so deductions would be. So the other 25%, 2% or 3% of that, I think we just leave that at the school level, and then we just work with them to see if they can move things around within the budget.
To trustee Buziak's question, you know, I've used this language before, that we would call this a good news budget because it's not a bad news budget. But the reality is that a 4% increase equaling $3.9 million is not a lot of an increase relative to inflation and the growth that we experience as a school division. This disappears quickly, right? Because it's really just right off the bat. And it talks about this in the report, the implication of the non-instructional agreement impacts that. We know every August when a significant number of our teachers on that anniversary date move up in the grid, there's an $800,000 debit to our system a little bit too. So call it good news because it's not, doesn't have a negative in front of it, but it's pretty small in terms of its impact on us.
Yeah, so just to despite the next point there, so yes, it's $3.8 million, but I think for us, what we're kind of working with right now is we do have some cost pressures that we have to look after before we even start to think of other aspects or any new initiatives and programs. So again, 76% of our budget being staffing, we do know that we have settlements with non-instructional and then also with the instructional staff coming up. That would take a big chunk of the $3.8 million that we got. We also know that carbon tax could reduce our expenses, but to what degree, that's what we'll find out. And we also think that tariff could have a big impact, just with the uncertainties that's happening there. You know, like we just ordered our laptops, we did that just before that came in. But again, we do know having a budget of just over $35-40 million in true operating expenses, that could have an impact on our spending. So the $3.8 million does disappear pretty quickly to cover some of these expenses. At the previous section, we talked about having to fund additional, potentially additional Jordan principal staff and things like that. So before we can consider those options or alternatives, we have to be able to fund some of our existing programs, and that's just what we're working through right now on the budget.
Remind me what the projected enrollment increase is supposed to be next year, percent-wise?
Yeah, we did 1.4%.
So 1.4 off of 3, 4.1, whatever that is, yeah. Any other questions on this, this update?
And then the last piece is just the clawback there. I spoke about that earlier. So when we did our fall budget update, I think we had put away about $1.4 million, but that's what we thought it would be. I think that's where the new funding model does benefit us a little bit, right? So we had put away 1.4. It actually came up to 578. So which is good and bad. Good in the sense that we have additional funding. And then, but in the sense that we have to figure out a way to expend that by
Rather have that problem than the other.
yes,
Yeah, for sure.
yes.
I didn't finish business school, but I do remember clearly that clawback is actually an official accounting term. Right?
Your 4th year.
I missed that.
So, but I would just as a plug, from an advocacy perspective, I know we do have some expenses for next year that are potentially unfunded. Would be if we could even take some of this for next year, even though I know we can't be under our ASO, but it would be great if we could see what the budget looks like and see if we could move some of the extra the 867 into 25-26 to kind of help offset some of those potential increases that we're seeing. So, but again, that's what we're working on about the next couple of
Next steps for us. So May 1st, we've got our board retreat, planning retreat scheduled. You'll have an invitation in your calendar, but the agenda is coming. And part of that is the kind of introductory look at budget thinking, right? About how things will look and as part of our process. So that's coming really right around the corner.
Like you have a question.
Trustee Martin, please.
Maybe, did I remember if I read it in a news thing, or did, you not get a letter or something through email that the government was talking about funding the increase for teachers, and I don't know. Is that something like?
Yes,
We did.
we did get communication from the ministry.
Okay, so that'll help with some of this then.
Well,
possibly.
the deal is still not ratified.
Yeah.
So, potentially if if and when, yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure, I didn't, that's not made it up my head
Yeah, that's fair. There's been a lot.
with this,
So
so.
unless anything changes, from my understanding, they cover the percent increase, right? But not the rate movement,
Okay.
right? Or any of those, right? Unless that's changing as part of the agreement, but then we don't have that detail. So that's something that we have to cover in those expenses.
And that's for instructional, non-instructional continues to be unfunded.
Exactly,
by the
correct.
government.
That was my question.
Yeah, fair point. Any other questions on this? I didn't have a question, but more of a comment. I wanted to make sure the board heard you. At our last meeting, we talked about writing a letter regarding health funding. Administration reached out to me after the funding profile came out and we saw that there was an increased PUF funding. We're like, oh, hold on, maybe we should look at this a little bit deeper. So Associate Superintendent Ola Deli just mentioned, and I just want to make sure it was clear to everyone that we paused that letter until we could have a better understanding of what that funding profile said. Now that we have that better understanding, we understand that PUF funding was increased, but this one was decreased, so the letter is back and will be going forward. We just wanted to make sure we understood what we were asking for in that letter, so.
Sense.
Yeah.
Ms. Westwater has a draft of that letter that we fix up and retool for that purpose. That's exactly the summary of it. Initially, it looked like PUF funding would have a substantial increase and like I said, right hand, left hand and
Yeah, we were a little worried to send a letter saying increase PUF funding when they increase PUF funding. So we're like, let's understand here.
so we'll shift the language around PUF funding and it's just funding supporting kids with needs, right? Because that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll retool a little bit because PUF did increase, but again, something else was taken away that impacts things.
Any questions? Did you have anything else to share?
No, that was it.
Did anyone have anything to share for trustee professional learning? I don't know that there was anything else that wasn't already on the agenda. Upcoming board events. So the work plan is pretty full. I don't know if you guys have all been, well, you heard, as we were talking earlier, there's, I think, 3 meetings tomorrow. But in general, we have the governance retreat May 1st. It's in your calendar. There's an agenda. I think I've seen a draft of it, but it hasn't been completely finalized. There's ASBA Zone 1. And then there's the composite high school graduation, and there's also ASBA right at the end of the month. So those are all kind of big events that are coming amongst all of these other kind of scheduled business. So I don't know if I've seen. For the composite high school, typically they ask us if we're going, if it's just on the, maybe you're just using the calendar invite for that. Yeah, I think in the past they asked, I don't know if they give us tickets. I think they did.
They've done different things. And I
Yeah.
can't remember which school did which, but
So, yeah, whichever works, as long as that's straightened out. And the governance retreat, is there anyone who isn't able to make that on May 1st? Good. Oh, trustee Yolanda, I saw you sneak your hand up after I said good.
I might not be able to.
Hopefully you are, but if not, at least the rest of us are, so that's good news. Anything else around the work fund that you guys wanted to discuss? No, okay, correspondence, we had a bit, so we had a letter from the Grand Prairie Catholic School Division to the Minister of Education regarding standardized diagnostic testing. We had a letter from Superintendent McDonald to a parent or follow up from their March 17th meeting and in regards to the school calendar that we talked about. And we had correspondence from the Minister of Education and Minister of Infrastructure regarding capital planning approval. Did anyone have any questions on that? No. All right, so we do need to go into camera tonight. I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. Trustee Martin? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right, and Chair is just pausing that. No. All right. Looking for motion to come out of camera. Trustee Lucia, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Perfect. And there was no actions arising from our discussion in camera. So there was nothing, no actions arising from our presentations either. So I will call this meeting adjourned at 9:27 p.m. Thanks, Katie.